Hey, my name is Chelsea Fagan, and I'm the founder and CEO of The Financial Diet, a totally independently owned and operated company of women who love to talk about money. Welcome to The Financial Confessions, a weekly show where we talk to people about their personal finances, their professional industry, and how money shapes their lives. You can listen to or watch new episodes of The Financial Confessions every week on YouTube or your preferred streaming platform. You can also support TFD and get exclusive access to our entire catalog of ad-free bonus videos, workshops, Discord community, our book club, and more by joining our members-only community on Patreon or YouTube. Our 2024 goal is to be primarily supported by our incredible community, and joining our membership program is the best way to do that. Enjoy the episode. Hey guys, it's me, it's your girl. And for those watching on YouTube, you can see that we are back in studio in the stewed with another in-person guest. And this time it is someone who I have known for 13 plus years now. Yeah. Fun fact, the person who took the very first photograph of my husband and myself together.
Oh my God.
Back in Gay Paris, where we both lived at the time. But anyway, she is someone that I knew I absolutely wanted to speak to for an episode on navigating being a single parent, specifically a single mother. She had a child fairly early in life, and to say that rearing him in the early days was a bit complicated financially is to undersell it. So without further ado, I'm just going to throw it over to our guest today. She is a writer, an app developer, an editor, business maven, mother, and many other things. Her name is Jessica Blankenship. Welcome.
Well, thank you. You introduced me better than I couldn't say any more.
Well, there it is. So just to set the stage, please tell our audience who you are.
Well, Chelsea basically said it. I'm Jessica Blankenship. I live in New York. I'm a writer, editor, in the middle of launching a new app, an astrology app for parents, which is a complete left turn. Like Chelsea, going through all the trials and tribulations of starting and running your own business. Always a good time. And a mom.
And she's been, she's not saying it, but she has been going through it the past couple of weeks with launching this app. So we're very happy to have you here.
I'm very happy to be doing something else.
Well, we'll get a little bit to the entrepreneurial stuff a bit later, but just to give the context. So tell us kind of the story of having your child and becoming an unexpected single parent.
Yeah. Like you said, it was pretty early on in life. I was 24 when I got pregnant and 25 when I had him. It was fresh on the heels of coming back to America from my interlude in Paris. And it was really unexpected. It was, I'd had an abortion several years before, and when I got pregnant, I was like, well, let's call up the old doctor and handle this the same way. And it was one of those things where I was completely not set up for it. I was very focused on work, very focused on being a 25-year-old, and
as
we often are, and like so many other people I've talked to since then, it was one of those things where you were just like, no, actually, let's just do this. Let's just roll with it. So to say that we were not logistically or materially set up is an understatement. His father and I had been friends for years and years, and we were together at the time. And at the
just
time,
dating.
Yeah, we were dating, and we were living together for a hot minute before it happened. And it was great. We figured it out. We're resourceful people, but we're both artists. Like, I was a freelance writer at the time, and he is a freelance props master for film and TV. And so our work was unsteady and unpredictable. So financial planning was difficult, and we were still young. And so we hadn't really gotten that game down yet. And the whole first couple of years of his life were just like a bit chaotic. But we we were together for about a year, and I knew that I was going to be moving to New York, and that was not the journey that he was on. And so we ultimately parted ways, and that is how I ended up parenting alone about the time my son was 18 months old.
So we got a lot already there in terms of the finances of it. So Can you walk us through just kind of logistically what it's like to be a parent who is solely responsible financially for your child, especially at that age, and kind of because I think a lot of people who come to single parenthood, not all, but many, come from a situation of divorce where there's some sort of legal process as far as alimony, child support, all of that. From a legal and financial standpoint, how did that kind of work functionally?
Yeah, good question. One thing that my son's father and I share is an aversion to tedious legal and governmental processes. We really did not want to even go to court and sort this stuff out. We're still really good friends, and I think having that foundation of friendship helped us to navigate things that just like worked for us. And so it helped that neither of us had any money, so it wasn't like one of us was going to be supporting the other, but it was really complicated. And I think I had always taken that financial leadership role in our relationship. And like when I was pregnant and when he was born, like I was the one who like applied for Medicaid and got us on Medicaid, and we were on food stamps for the first year of his life, and I was managing all of that. And so when it came to figuring out, what our financial dynamic looked like after separating, it was basically like he was going to follow my lead anyways. So we worked out a situation where he was paying $400 a week and continued that forever, basically. And that continued after we moved to New York. We moved to New York just a few weeks after my son turned 2, just me and him. And his father stayed back in Atlanta. And so that's the shape of our child support situation. And it kind of never changed, but we never had a legal agreement around it. It was just, spit, handshake, have a good time.
Wow. Well, so one thing I know about you is that for a long time when your son was younger, you were not making a lot of money.
Yeah.
I mean, you were on that media grind. We were at 2 different websites, briefly at the same one, but we were not making, I was making horrendous money for a dual income, no kid household. Yeah. I can't even imagine for a single parent with a child household. So first of all, kind of like, how did you just kind of paper that over and make it work? But also, you seem quite magnanimous about the issue, but were you not just like, I feel like I would be lighting that man's house on fire, like pay for your kid?
Yes. Wanted to light the man's house on fire, verbally lit his house on fire anytime I felt inclined, he will tell you. Yeah, well, actually we were working at the same website in the days that I was on food stamps, if you want to know just how little money we were making.
Shout out Thought Catalog.
Yeah, God bless. Yeah, it was one of those things, and I think this is a dynamic that a lot of people who've come through media, especially if you've had kids to juggle at the same time, would be familiar with, which is like the promise of this sort of gauntlet that you have to go through financially, where in order to have access to the promised land of vested equity and higher salaries, you have to take really low salary jobs that are very demanding. You've got huge production quotas. You're working basically round the clock, and you're not making enough money. And at least back in 2014, there were way fewer remote jobs. So I really had to be here in New York, where the cost of living is exponentially higher, making not enough money to live. So like when I got a senior editor job at Bustle back when it was brand new, it was just 10 of us in a living room in Brooklyn back then.
Getting photographed with the laptop on the man's legs.
I did. I had the immense pleasure of being in the laptop leg days. And it was really fun. We were having a really good time. And I got that job offer when I still lived in Atlanta. It's actually the catalyst for when I finally made the move to New York. And by any other standards, it was good money. I was making $88,000 a year, which like in Atlanta would have been great. Although now it's pretty comparable cost of living to here. But when you factor in the cost of like actually raising a child, like it was nothing. It was just gone before it even hit my bank account every month.
So as you said, you lit the man's house on fire verbally, but how did you functionally navigate? Because something I think a lot of people that I certainly have struggled with financially in the past, and I think a lot of people do, is a sense of resentment, a sense of unfairness, especially like, for example, like we've talked to people this season who are, in hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt for, degrees that they didn't need, things that they were encouraged to take on. Like we can find ourselves in these financial situations where every day is such a struggle, and maintaining kind of a sense of positivity or motivation can be really difficult. So like, how did you manage that?
Well, I think Revenge is a great motivator. That's one thing. It really powers you. It was incredibly hard, and it was actually a huge fixture in the shape of our lives back then. The resentment and the anger and like the sadness was like, you can't talk about the financial realities of being a single parent, especially if you're not making enough money, without talking about how the stress of that lifestyle factors into it, because there's the impact on your health, the impact on everything. It affects everything. And so that resentment was a huge part of it, because basically when it all goes back to the decision to even have a child, I was like, abortion post haste. And my son's father actually like kind of talked me out of it. He was like, listen, I know you want to move to New York. I know that that's what you need for your career. That's your plan. Cause I was like, I respect that you never want to leave Georgia. Like, God bless, like that's your life. But I'm going in a different way. So baby, incompatible with that. And he was like, listen, I'll go to New York. I'll do whatever. I will make the time to support your career. Like, I'll make sure that us having this kid doesn't derail your professional and personal goals. And that was kind of the deal, that we would stay there, we would have the baby, and when the time came, we would go to New York. And it became really clear during the first year of my son's life that every time the topic even came up, he would completely shut down, just like completely decompensate. And it became very clear to me that if I could ever get him to go, it would be dragging him kicking and screaming the whole way. And he would be this massive emotional liability the entire time. And I was like, okay, it would be easier to do it on my own. But when I get there and you're struggling with the logistical barriers of being one parent in that situation, of course, it's like, well, I'm not supposed to be doing this alone. That was never the plan. Yeah. And there were a few points, especially in the first year to 2 years, where it did feel like I was not going to be successful at keeping all the balls in the air, that I was not going to be successful at making this work. And I knew that if that happened, that the resentment that I felt towards him for leaving me out to dry and for me having failed because of that would become a defining fixture of my life. Like, I knew that I would never get over that. And I was really scared that that was going to happen. So yeah, I was pretty upset during those days. But also, I'm a child of divorce. My mom, for all of the amazing things that she did, also, her thing was to weaponize her kids against her exes. She was mad at them, and so she wanted to turn us against them. And all it ultimately did for us as kids was to give us this idea that our dads didn't love us, that they didn't care about us. And that was really just to make her feel better, to see her own anger reflected in her children, to have us on her side. And I was not going to do that. So, while at the same time I wanted to burn the man's house down, and I made sure he knew just how much he'd failed me, I would then sort of, when my son was around, really turn, and I was upholding this myth of the perfect dad to my son. And I don't regret that for a minute, but it's just extra labor you have to do. It's like, he's always felt like I have the greatest dad, that me and his dad are like best friends. And we've worked my son is 11 and a half now. And at this point, me and his dad are great friends again. Like, we've worked through that, but it took years. And I had to grow quite a bit more as a person than I wanted to be able to get there. But yeah, it's like, if you're going to be a single parent, you have all that extra emotional labor to do, especially if you're going to do the work on your kids' behalf to make sure that they develop secure relationships with everybody and that they don't feel privy to it. Like, if Arrow grows up and watches this podcast, it might be the first time he even knows that I hated his dad back in the day. And that was a lot of work on top of the work of parenting him alone.
Well, I mean, that being said, even without the weaponizing children against parents, kids are smart. And, I have a friend who went through a divorce, so not quite the same. The kids, I think, were a little older. Point being, there was a long period of time where she was everything. And she was on top of having so much of the time burden, the, sort of day-to-day responsibility burden. She also he got to be fun dad. He got to be like, we're going and we're going to go to Disneyland, or we're going to go skiing. We're going to go do all this stuff. And she was the one at home doing the homework. And you're such a mom type, like,
Sure.
I want to be at dad's. Like, dad's is so much more fun. And I think there was like a stretch of time where that was like incredibly brutal. But I think now the kids are reaching an age where they're like, oh, dad was like fun dad because he was like not present and didn't have
Totally.
to be a parent.
Yeah.
So I feel like I feel like most kids do figure that out for themselves.
They do. And that's always been, that's actually been exactly my working theory in raising my son, is like, there's no way that I can protect him from the realization as he gets older that his dad was not around and that it was a matter of choice. I offered him so many times, you can move here and I'll support you. You can move here with your girlfriend and live with me and I'll support both of you. You have no idea. Like,
A better woman than me.
well, it's, it's just anything for my son. I mean,
Right.
honestly, it's like, it would have been, and I'm one of those people that dreams. I'm constantly trying to convince my sisters and all my best friends to move to a giant bougie commune with me, because I love having people around. I grew up with 3 sisters and I like having everyone around, and I think it's good for kids. But there's no way for me to protect him from one day looking up and realizing how much he hasn't been there. And what I can do is make sure that by the time he has to weather that realization, he already has the benefit of like a stable emotional foundation. He's already developed that sense of secure attachment to the world around him. And that's going to help him navigate that a lot better, because I can't really change that. And he will figure that out. And your strategy pivots a little bit as they get older. It's like I don't burden him with the weight of like sort of my own feelings about my relationship with his father, but I do allow him to like see a little bit more so that he can also see at this point what like healthy conflict looks like healthy conflict resolution and emotional management and all of those things. Like if his dad is planning to come visit and he doesn't come, or if it's been too long since he visited, which like still, if we're talking about the financials of it, like I pay for those trips. Like I've given him a credit card where he can just like book his flights and I'll pick him up. And like, I just try to make it as like frictionless as possible so that he will come visit as much as possible. And like, if it's been a while, at this point I will because I'm unemotional enough about it that I can be really mindful about how I show it to my son. Like, oh, like, he hasn't been here in a while. I wish he would come visit, or like, oh, it's so disappointing. He was supposed to come and now he can't. And he can see how to navigate that, like, in a healthy way. But he's also 11 and he's just like, okay, well, I'm going to go hang out with my friends and go to Starbucks. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, I mean, so obviously, the son is the light and love of your life. You would not trade him for anything. Good kid, among the best. But so obviously you're now in a position where, whatever circumstances brought him to your life, you're so glad he's here. But being pragmatic, I think the story that you described, where you as the woman who would have to have the child, carry the child, give birth to the child, feed the child, all of that stuff, and take the, as we know in hetero couples, the majority of the financial, professional, all those hits. And you had these other life plans that were in direct kind of conflict with having a kid at that time. And then the man who's like, come on, babe, let's have a kid. Like, wouldn't that be so romantic? Like, I think that's a really, really common theme. And I even personally know women in my own life who are going through that right now.
Yeah.
Who are in a different circumstance, maybe. Like, they're not looking to move. They're married, maybe. They've been thinking about it. But they're like, I feel like he's not understanding what it actually means to have a kid. And I think there can be that level of like, vibes-based decision-making around having a child for men, because it's just not the same. So, I mean, obviously you would have still made the decision you made because you love your son. And of course, but to a woman who's in that situation with her male partner, who's navigating it, like, what is your advice as someone who made the choice you did?
It's actually really funny because, well, I'm married now. I've been married for about 3 years, been with my husband for about 6 years. He's an angel on earth. He's great.
Not the stepdad, dad who stepped up.
Yeah, for real. He's an excellent dad. And our son is now a testament to nature versus nurture, because they are really a lot alike now. But we're still young enough that we're kind of, I would say, like in the last like window of years, we're like, if we're going to have more, like we should probably get moving. And so we're having those conversations. And we just had a conversation the other day where I'm like, my son was like 5 when he came into the picture. And I was like, listen, like there's wanting a kid in theory. And then there's actually wanting to live your life with the day-to-day experience of parenting a child. And those are radically different things. I was like, when I look at the possible roads forward, you know, having my one son out of the house by the time I'm 43 is like, a girl is vibing after that. Like
yeah.
we're living our happiest middle age. And also I love being a mom. And so to go back to the starting line is like, absolutely, like that sounds great. But my husband has not lived that early life. And I have a 3-year-old niece and an 18-month-old nephew, and they recently spent 3 weeks with us, and we were all sick the whole time. And I was like, you have to actually think about, like, do you want to be sick every other week? Do you want, and I'm painting all these scenarios because it is a lot of vibes-based decision making, and it is a lot of people kind of curating the idea of what they think they want for their lives, even if there's like a huge disparity between the actual day-to-day experience. And so that is my only advice, but there is also no way that you can know. I feel the obligation is the person in the relationship who's been through that to shed that visibility to the best of my ability. But you can't really know until you know. I think you just got to be kind of down for whatever. But it is, I think the takeaway is to like interrogate your desires and find out what you actually desire from your day-to-day life and what you're hoping being a parent will give you.
Well, I also feel like for a lot of the people who go through this, you know, who, for example, like you are a single parent, but a lot of women are single parents in a marriage. Do you know what I'm saying? Like they're the ones who are doing everything. And like, I don't know if you've read Fair Play by Eve Rodsky. Seminal text. Shout out. Also former TFC guest. But basically, I mean, it's about, you know, the humongous disparity in domestic labor, child rearing, all of that stuff in marriages, and a real interrogation of that. And these are, you know, she's an attorney. A lot of her friends are attorneys. These are very high-powered career women who are equal, if not higher earners. And yet, you know, the husband can't even get a bag of carrot sticks and a peanut butter sandwich in the bag. They don't know who their kids' friends' parents are. They don't know who any numbers at school. Like, and this is just kind of across the board, right? And so for me, when I look at situations like that, like kind of being at the age where I'm, you know, basically I'm not the only, but one of the only people in my life who is not having kids, not at all planning to. And most of the women in my life are somewhere between about to have, thinking of having, just had, in the process of having. So like in that kind of dawn of things. And so you get to see the transition from married couple, no kids, to married couple with 1, 2, whatever, many kids. And what's striking to me is how many of these couples, that balance at home was already way the off before the kids came into the picture.
That's what I was going to say. Like, the thing is, just don't expect anything to change.
Right.
Who you are before you have kids and the dynamic of your relationship it's going to be the same way after kids. It's just going to, but you're also going to be a lot more tired. There's a lot more work to do. And so any imbalances will be proportionately much larger imbalances. They're going to feel that way. Like I wouldn't even be able to contemplate the notion of having more children with the way that I work and the way that I just want my life to be without already feeling like the distribution of labor in my relationship is how I want it to be.
Right. Like if it were like this, but more, you'd be fine.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, he already does more of the like actual household management stuff and the
king.
Yeah, absolute king. But also at the same time, it's like I know that I am always going to be more of the strategic lead of the family. Like I'm the one who's considering things, holding the big picture, being the proactive driver of different important initiatives. And so it again is like you have to just be comfortable with the balance of how things are. Like I'm more of the strategic leader and he's more of the details executor, and that really works. But yeah, in every relationship I've seen the dynamic stays the same. Like watching my sister go from no kids to 2 kids in her relationship. Her and her husband have been together since they were literally children, since we were like 14. And she's a year younger than me, so we're practically twins. And so I've seen their relationship over a really long period of time before they had kids. And I can tell you, like, they took the time to make sure that their dynamic was super tight before they brought kids into it. And they're a machine. Like, they're such a machine as parents together.
Wow.
Yeah.
Love that for them. Well, you know, part of it also, like, I think there's something like, there are not many things that I like, not like miss out on, but I'm always so like mystified by the level of we just got to get it done that being a parent imbues in a person. And like sometimes, and I think that obviously is, what served you and what serves almost all parents through difficult times is like, we can't let the side down. Like we just have to get this done. There's no option to, call it a day or like freak out or stay in bed all,
Totally.
you just have to kind of get it done.
Yeah.
And I think like there's obviously huge benefits to that. There's also like, I don't know if you saw the like $50,000 scam article.
Yes. Oh.
Okay, so that article, we could talk about it. It took me all the way out and into the next county because at the end of it, what so struck me, and when I read stuff like this from parents and mothers especially, I'm like, well, I'm sitting this one out. I can't relate. I don't know. But as a parent, so just for context, the financial advice columnist at the Cut at New York Magazine fell victim to a scam where callers who were initially pretending to be from Amazon passed her on to people who pretended to be the FTC and then the CIA and essentially convinced her over the course of several hours that she needed to put $50,000 cash into a shoebox and hand it to a man in an unmarked car, basically, which she obviously immediately realized after the fact was a scam. And so the kind of concept of the article is like, this is what to look out for. But I say this to say, at the end of the article, there was like a very clear message of like, I did this largely because my son was potentially threatened. They like invoked her son, and she was like, and that because she like throughout the article was like, oh, this doesn't pass the sniff test, whatever. But she was like, they invoked my son, and I was like, I would do it. Like I would do anything to protect my son. And I read stuff like that, and you see stuff like that with, sometimes being a parent leading you to make these kind of incomprehensible from the outside opinions. What is your take as a mother on that kind of thing?
Oh, man. I mean, a lot of sympathy for that. Like, yeah, I do think that, like, you're on a very literal level, when you have any reason to think that your kid is in danger, your brain fundamentally is functioning differently. Like, it's just functioning differently. And so I think that's going to land a little different with everyone. Like, I was reading that and I was like, well, what would I have done? Like everybody was like, you read that and you're like, well, what would I do in this situation? And I feel like I would have done something completely different if I felt like my kid was in danger, which is like, we would have left the state. I would have been like, okay, this reads like a scam, but they know details about my kid. So I'm not playing around. Like, we just need to get the out. Like, we need to get out of here. And we will, and then I will sort this out. I will go journalistic on this from a safe hiding place. But yeah, I mean, I get it. I don't know. Like, I've gotten those calls, like, where people are like, the CIA is coming to arrest you right now for unpaid back taxes, or not the CIA, the IRS.
The IRS.
The other one. And like, I almost got by one of those.
You did?
Well,
Tell me more.
I didn't like, I remember I was walking in Soho one day and I got the call and they were just like, they had a lot of information and they were like, you are late paying your taxes and like, this is a crisis. You will get arrested if you don't pay us. And I was like, well, it sounds like me. I was like, it definitely sounds like something I would do.
Like, true.
And I was really stressed. But you just, even then within 10 minutes, I got off the phone and I was like, nope, this is not how the IRS would handle this, like, at all. Like, this is crazy. So I don't know. It is hard to imagine falling for that, but I don't know, man. I think a lot about the way that like stressing about our kids' well-being has like completely messed with our brains. Like,
please continue.
No, it's just like when I had the like sort of very youthful thing in his early years of like, I never worried about anything. I just on a bone deep level assumed a good and safe outcome. That bad things happen to other people, but not to me, the way that we're all invincible when we're in our 20s. And that extended to my child. So I was not an anxious mom early on, but you can only go through so many years and school shootings and pandemics before actually like it turns the page. And now I'm worried about his well-being all the time. All the time. I'm expecting a catastrophic phone call. Like I'm anything. And I don't think that I'm alone in that at all. I think that the last handful of years, there have been more things that parents have had to actively worry about. Like even school shootings, it's like Sandy Hook happened when my son was like a year old and I couldn't get off the floor for days. I was like, oh, this is different now. The like vulnerability of your kids becomes real to you at a certain point, and that it's terrifying, and then it's always terrifying. But now those kinds of things happen all the time. Like all the time. Like there was a swatting thing at my son's school last year where somebody called and said there was an active shooter at a bunch of schools, like all in my son's area. And for about 20 minutes, we thought it was real. And it's just, that's just kind of the thing. And you have kids during the pandemic and you're reading an article every hour and a half about how messed up they're going to be from it. And so I do think about the moment and the last few years that parents have had to go through, somebody's anxiety being elevated to the point of making like a decision that they should by every measure have known better than to make is like very forgivable to me. Like I could buy it.
And I just want to take a quick pause here and thank today's episode sponsor, ZocDoc. If there's one thing you should actually take the time to do, it's find yourself a good doctor. Whether it's for your mental health, your annual checkup, or for finally seeing the dentist because you've been putting it off for years, like myself. And finding the right doctor for you should not be an overwhelming task. It should be the opposite. And as someone who actually genuinely uses ZocDoc and has been using it a lot lately because I've been doing all of my appointments, I highly recommend you try it. ZocDoc is a free app and website where you can search and compare highly rated in-network doctors near you and instantly book appointments with them online. Instead of going to TikTok for medical advice, no shade because you know I love TikTok, it's just not where I nor you should seek out medical advice, I use ZocDoc to find the right medical professionals, and you should too. Like I said, I've been using ZocDoc for years, and I've especially been using them in the past several weeks because I'm doing all of my various medical checkups and appointments and things that I've honestly been putting off, and it makes the process of finding the right doctor genuinely so easy and effortless. Plus, it helps you keep track of all of your appointments. And if for whatever reason you're not feeling your best, finding the right care shouldn't take up your time and energy. That's where ZocDoc comes in to help. Using their free app that millions of users rely on, you can find the right doctor that meets your needs and fits your busy schedule. Here in New York City, some doctors are booked up for weeks, if not months in advance, and that's not particularly helpful when you have something that needs timely attention. With ZocDoc, you can book an appointment with a few taps in their app. Choose from thousands of patient-reviewed doctors and specialists, browse doctor profiles, upload and verify your insurance information, and get the care you need in one place. Go to ZocDoc.com/TFC and download the ZocDoc app for free. Then find and book a top-rated doctor today. That's ZocDoc.com/TFC. ZocDoc.com/TFC. Well, to that point, though, I mean, you're absolutely right that there are just so many things bearing down on us now at all times. And especially, you know, as a parent, there's just so much that you have to be kind of aware of. But I also think, like, you know, it's because you see a lot of parents who are making, like, I mean, did you see about the measles outbreak in Florida?
I cannot.
Okay.
I
so
literally
like,
cannot.
But here's the thing, and I partly want to talk to you about this because I feel like you have a very nuanced perspective on this as a parent where, like, I mean, I know you've been, we're not going to get into details here, but you've been going at it with like the local Facebook group on some issues. Like
now and then.
You're out here getting like doxxed and shit. The Westchester moms don't around. But like to that point though, like when you look at, so for context, the measles outbreak, I think 200 unvaccinated kids in a school in Florida have the measles now. And like, we're getting like, I'm sure like bubonic plague is next in terms of all this, you know, the unvaxxed epidemic and all of that. Yeah. But a lot of parents are making like objectively really bad decisions about their kids and are like, it's motivated by like, it all comes from that same place, right? Like a fear-based place, an anxiety, like a desire to protect. Like I fully believe that all of those parents who are choosing to send their children to school unvaccinated and are now dealing with children who have like massive outbreaks of diseases that had been eradicated, or, you know, illnesses that had been eradicated for decades, they think they're doing the right thing.
Yeah.
It's all coming from the same instinct. And I think now we see such a heightened level of contradictions between people who their fundamental perspective of what it means to do the right thing by your child is so different from person to person. So like, how do you kind of interrogate and navigate your own instincts as a parent?
Yeah, well, I think you nailed it in that it's about just interrogating oneself. And I think one trait that I like about myself is that I don't hesitate to see my flaws and like what's wrong with me. Like I try to really work with those pretty actively in order to mitigate their damage on my life. So I don't automatically think that all of my instincts are right or that my decisions are right for sure. I'm very aware of like where my own anxiety and my own hangups come into play with decision making. And I think understanding the anatomy of that in yourself is a really strong step in the right direction of actually landing at the best possible outcomes. So that's one thing, but I think that might be the only thing. Like, it's really interesting. Like, I have thought a lot about the vaccination thing in particular, because it's one thing that's changed a lot in the time that I've been a parent. Like when I had my son, you know, the thing was the trendy thing, like crunchy moms back then, the biggest thing that like crunchy moms were doing was just doing like a delayed vaccine schedule. Mm-hmm. It was like, we don't want to overload the kids' systems. And I was like, yeah, that sounds reasonable to me. They're still getting all the shots. I asked my doctor and she was like, yeah, no, as long as he gets all the shots. And I was like, okay, fine. And so it was like, that's what the like weird crunchy moms were doing. That's as bad as it was. And I'm fascinated by how just radically worse it's become in the decade plus since then. Have you read Doppelganger by Naomi Klein? Also,
it's on my list, not yet.
Oh my God, it's so good. It's so good. But one of the things that she talks about in there is how the sort of like question the establishment, like anti-vax mom thing, which is like very sort of like dovetails with the QAnon mom cohort, but it no longer sort of lives along the political boundaries that it used to. It's very much like moms from all over the political spectrum are suddenly like not trusting vaccines, not trusting medicine. And I keep thinking a lot about like why that happens and why our sense of maternal instinct to parent our kids is seeming to like malfunction and shoot off in all of these weird and new ways at greater numbers. And I mean, everything to me always comes down to like what is happening on a society level that is undermining and eroding our sense of safety. Like what is not making us feel like we and our kids are like well cared for. Like it's not that complicated to figure out. Like you are not living in a world where you've got your basic fundamental material needs in any way guaranteed. Like there is no way for you to feel like your kids are safe. There is this like ambient sense of dread all the time, and there is no safety net. There is no financial safety net. There is no healthcare safety net. You have actually no reason to trust the institutions of power, because what have the institutions of power ever done to make you more cared for and make you safer and make your kids safer? Mm-hmm. And so across the political spectrum, you just have more and more people who like that sort of sense of being ill at ease and how that intersects with your instincts to protect your kids, added on top of that being just flooded and overstimulated with a barrage of news stories every day. Like, I mean, how could you not just have those wires tripping out on all directions?
Well, that's what struck me the most, going back to that scam article. What struck me the most about it was that it felt like it said more about being extremely deferential to authority than about being a victim to a scam. Like, and I think that says a lot about the kind of class stratifications of who still really buys into a sense of authority. Like, I think it came out that like this author comes from like really substantial financial privilege and like has had a very, very, very privileged education and things like that. And I think like the few remaining people who like, because I think to your point, like across the political spectrum, we're getting to a point where like someone calls you and they're like, I'm from the government, and you're like, go yourself. Yeah. You know, they're like, absolutely not. Like whether or not they even believe that person's from the government, they're like, the last person I'm going to listen to is like the CIA clique, you know? And it's more of like, and to your point, like it can really curdle and go off in a bunch of really negative directions. But on the flip side, I feel like we have fewer and fewer people who feel that sense of like trembling before authority. And the people who remain that kind of in lockstep with it, I think is becoming almost more a class divide than anything else, because it's the few remaining people that these institutions really serve. Yeah.
And that's absolutely it. And it's like, it does make sense that if you come from a family that has money and you have all of that baked in class privilege, you know, even if it's unconsciously, that like you're the last kind of person that these institutions are supposed to work for. And you add to that this assumption, this conditioning that money is what buys you safety and security. Like, of course, it's like, okay, my child is in danger. Handing over a box of cash is certainly the way to solve that. Like, that is what money does. That is what it's for. And if I just do the right things and listen to the people who are in power, who are telling me to do them, then everything will be fine.
Right.
Money will change hands and everyone will be safe. So yeah, that tracks.
Well, you know, kind of going back to making decisions for your child. So one kind of functional question I had was, being a single parent of someone who, with a partner who wasn't always super present in a lot of the functional decisions and that you have to support in a lot of ways, what authority do you give that other parent to like have a say in all of these decisions?
He never asked for any. So I always say I've been really lucky in that way. He never asked for any, which is great.
Unintentional
honestly,
king behavior, I suppose.
Unintentional king behavior. It's actually really, it's been pretty effortless. And I've always said that. I'm like, you say stand here, he's going to stand here. And I don't know. I mean, that's the next best thing. Like, honestly, like if you're someone who is a pretty effective actor on your own, then I see people who are struggling. They're like in court battles and they're fighting over this like granular control over their kids' lives, and I'm like, man, that seems worse. It seems a lot. It does seem much worse. So yeah, I never had to do that. He never asked for anything. Gun to his head, maybe he could tell you what grade his child is in. It's just,
and this man was like, have this kid.
I know.
Talk about vibes based.
Yeah, well, but also talk about really, really sitting with why you want to have kids.
Yes.
Because the difference was, I'll tell you, it was not because he wanted to have a kid. I had one abortion appointment and I went to it and I was like, I don't want to. And I left. And
so it was also your decision in that way.
Well, sure. I made and canceled 3 appointments.
Wow.
It was very much like a head versus
heart
gut thing. And, you know, maybe that's some like divine knowing that you're meant to have a child, or maybe it's just being 24 and inclined towards chaos. Who knows? Who could say? But after one canceled appointment, there was maybe like a 24-hour window where I was like, maybe I want to have a kid. And he just straight up told his mom that we were going to have a baby. And then his mom was all excited about it, who's the best grandmother in the world, by the way. She's a true lunatic. I love her. But he told her, and then it was about not wanting to disappoint his mother. It was not about not wanting to have a kid. So crazy banana stuff. But yeah, no, definitely like it is helpful that I've never had any trouble making decisions. And my son's always been in school in New York and his dad lives in Georgia. So he's not been a factor in any.
Do you feel like your ability to be very good friends with this person now is because they have like truly like changed and become accountable and like mea culpa? No, you're just like, no, it's not worth it. It's not worth hating this person.
It's because like I triumphed. I mean, honestly, it's like
won.
I won. I did. And it's like, but it's like also like I want him to win. Like I want everyone to be, I'm kind of like, you know, I want the rising tide to lift all boats. It's like even in my new business that I'm like,
which we're about to talk about.
Yeah, which would be great and fun to talk about. But like even that, like I carved off a piece of work for him because like of the strike last year, he wasn't working. And so I was like, okay, here's things that you can do for this. Like I'm trying to constantly make sure that if I'm like a conduit of more resources, like in the last few years, I'm just making more money than anyone in my family ever has, like through client work and through different things. That's how I'm even starting this business. And so I'm like, I don't feel spiteful. Like I just kind of feel compassionate. Like he's got a lot of limitations and ultimately he's the one who's missed out on the joy of parenting his child, which has been fun as shit. It's been amazing. And he's missed that. And I know that he suffers and is like that regret is his burden to bear. I don't have to be an asshole to him on top of it.
Right.
And it's like, I did survive that period where the numbers did not add up. And they literally did not add up. Like they didn't. I was going into debt for the first few years I was in New York. Like I was on the cusp of getting evicted all the time. You know, we could talk for hours about how difficult it was, but I got on the other side of it and I was slowly making more money. And then my son was able to start public school. And so the numbers got right side up a little bit, and you get out of it. And now, like, I love my career. I'm in love with the life I've built for my son and the experiences that we've had. And so I don't have to rub his nose in it, because just a life well lived is great revenge.
I mean, that is true. I think, you know, I always like to ask about how people navigate that feeling, because I'm someone who I think I still struggle with having a sense of like injustice about certain things, like for people who have maybe not acted well professionally, or like done shady shit, or like not been, you know, who have betrayed or been disloyal, done things like that. Like I get where you're coming from. Like I have a sense of like, because my life has reached a level of stability that I never thought would be possible, I do feel an enhanced sense of compassion toward people who, to your point, like they might be struggling, they might be going through it. I really struggle with people who are bad actors who are not struggling. And it's like, obviously we're in an industry where like, show me a not a bad actor at this point. Like,
totally. Yeah.
Like there's, you know, there are people that I know that I'm like, you should probably be Me Too'd. You know what I'm saying? Like, and I hate using that as a verb, but like, you're a shady motherfucker and you're out here prospering. Like, and I talked to my husband about it, and he's always like, that's life, and that's especially America, so get used to it. But it is a feeling I really struggle with, and I think part of it is coming from financial insecurity and always feeling like it was such a struggle. And when you see people for whom, you know, the finances are, I always say it's a lot easier to be a good person when you have money.
Yes.
Like I feel like an infinitely better person. Like I'm more compassionate, I'm more patient. Like I have a lot of qualities that I didn't have before because I have that financial security. So when I see people with financial security who don't operate in that way, I really struggle with resentment.
Yeah, I definitely do. I mean, I remember my dad always telling me like so many conservative parents love to tell their kids, like, just wait till you grow up and you get just like a little more money. Like you'll, didn't you just do a TikTok about this the other day where you were like, it was you or someone else, I saw it and I was like, this is so funny because I say this all the time. My dad was always like, when you make a little more money, your politics will change. You'll become more conservative.
There's probably someone else, but I think that all the time.
Yeah. And it's just so funny how the opposite has happened. Like it just has not happened, where it's like, it's not, I mean, I'm no Jeff Bezos. So like, it's not like I have the resources to affect large scale change, but like, those are the fantasies that I have.
Yes.
Like those are the fantasies where it's like, I would love to have like really high quality free school lunch for every kid in New York. Like I would love to have $1 billion company so I could just write that check. Like those are the kinds of things, and it would not affect my quality of life whatsoever to be able to do that. And no, I save my resentment for those people. It's easy enough to just forgive, you know, your weak head kid's dad, like whatever, because ultimately like that kind of resentment is like, that just, it eats you alive. Like it was just a lot to carry around. It's just easier to not be mad at him.
You know, I know you you went into debt in the early years of raising your son alone. Could you just, for people at home who might be struggling with that right now, give like just a quick explainer of the debt that you went into, why you went into it, and how you got out of it?
Yeah. So just not to throw out too many numbers, but when we moved to New York, my son was, he was still a toddler, so he was in private preschool. There was nowhere else for him to go. There's no public preschool for him to go to, or daycare. So our rent was about $3,000 a month, and his daycare, because he needed early, it was like from 8:30 in the morning until like 5 or 6 in the afternoon, 5 days a week, because I'm solo parenting and I had to work. So he's there, and so that is like beyond normal sort of preschool hours. So that costs a lot more, and so that was about $3,700 a month. And that was after I talked them down from a discount. And so that was, you add that up, and I'm making $88,000 a year. So like, that's after taxes, like I'm already just for those two things spending more than I'm making. At some point in like 2015, I moved jobs and was then making $125 a year. So I was barely breaking even. Things didn't turn right side up until 2016. He went into public pre-K and I was then making $125 and our rent went down to $2,400. And then finally the bleeding stopped a little bit. But during those 2 years, I went into a little bit of credit card debt, but I didn't have a lot of credit cards because I had really bad credit because I was not taught financial literacy by my parents. And
saving grace.
Yeah, honestly, yes. But it was a lot about like what must be paid and what can I get away with not paying. So during those years, like my rent was always late. Child support, that $400 a week was inconsistently paid. So I could not really count on that. So I kind of knew I was leaning a lot on like my powers of like bullshitting and deferring and negotiation to like things were just always paid late. By the time he got out of preschool, I owed them a lot of money. By the time I left one apartment and went into another apartment, I owed them a lot of money. But I knew that I could get away with that. It was just like, how long can we sort of cobble together this? How many Band-Aids can we put on this so that we don't bleed to death until we get out of the crisis zone? And then I can start paying it back. So, and because I know I'm like, there is like a long clock on how long it would actually take them to evict me. And how long can I convince his school to let him still go there when I owe them money? And it turns out like it was just like I was fighting those battles all the time. I was kind of locked in battle with my landlord and with his school at all times. And I was just kind of the bad tenant and the bad mom who was always late and paying things short. And my bills were always paid late. But, you know, it was like the things that cannot be deferred are, you know, medical care and having healthy food in the house and making sure that he's got his new like winter clothes because he had to grow every 6 months. That's what kids do. So things like that, it was like on the material surface of our day-to-day lives, everything was provided for because of all the people I was not paying. And so by the end of that, when he goes into public school and I was making a little bit more money, then it was really just paying off. I think by the end, I owed my old landlord around $12,000 and I owed his school probably about the same. Yeah, that sounds about right. And so then I just spent the next like 3 years paying that off. But within 2 years, so he went into public school in 2016, and within 2 years I was up to making $200,000 a year, and so I was able to pay it off more quickly.
Well, before I let you go, I wanted to, before we even get into this comment section, I'm just going to let you know right now, we're going to discuss her new app, which is an astrology app for parents. I don't want to hear anything about like astrology, blah, blah, blah. This is a woo-friendly zone. I love astrology. A lot of the TFD girls love astrology. It's no goofier than religion. Let's be clear about that. We could go on that debate for a long time, but let's be clear. It is no goofier than religion. I don't want to hear your little naysaying in the comments. It's a very cool and very awesome thing. So tell us about your app.
I'm not scared of your comments. You've heard about my life. You can't. I feel nothing.
She said, come at her guns blazing.
I'm dead inside. No, yeah. So the new app is, it's an astrology app for parents. It's called Star Child. And so it's just super fun. I mean, we actually have a lot of content on the site that's like, what if you think astrology is bullshit? It's like, it doesn't really matter. The sort of theory of the whole app, the entire purpose of it is really just to give parents a framework to think about their children as something other than extensions of themselves, as their whole own people. And astrology is very convenient in that it gives you an elaborate and detailed and holistic language to talk about that and to think about it. Like to really think about, okay, here's the way that astrology says you emotionally process, and here's how you give comfort and seek comfort. Here's how you communicate. Here are your these are your things. And then here are your kids' things. And we make sure to sort of build it within the context of, you know your kids better than we do. Don't let us tell you how to live. But also it prompts thinking about your kids as their own people, which is nice.
What's your sun, moon, rising?
Wow, it's so personal. Sagittarius sun, which is probably why I agreed to talk about all of these things in detail.
Half man, half horse.
It's just saying things truthfully and hurting everyone in the process. Yes, sun, Sagittarius, Leo moon, Leo rising.
Slay. I'm Aquarius, Libra.
I love that. I know. I remember when I found out that you had prominent Libra placements, I was like, well, you being the most stylish bitch in Manhattan.
Oh my God. Please,
Definitely.
I wish.
But I'm just saying that like that is actually really core to how you engage with the world, how you build an environment around yourself. Like that's like really important to your sense of like comfort, and your emotional landscape is actually your physical surroundings, and then feeling balanced and beautiful, and fairness is very important to you, which is a core Libra value. You're as Libra as anyone could possibly be. I absolutely love that.
Thank you. My sister's a Libra sun, and she is my, what's the word? She's like my tether in the sense that like we look similar. We have a lot of similar traits, but she lives the exact opposite life. She's like soon to be a mom of 3, homesteading in South Carolina with like livestock.
That is like your mirror world.
It really is. Everyone always calls it like alternate universe Chelsea.
Oh my God, I love that.
But okay, so first of all, I must say one of the most beautifully designed apps I've ever seen.
Thank you.
You really left no crumbs, honestly, with that. But just for clarity, this is not airing, but we will air this once it's available. So
it will be in the next few days.
Okay,
yeah.
Well, just in case.
Great.
So where should people go to get it?
They can go to the Apple App Store or the Google Play Store if you're on Android, if that's your journey. And also, and on the website, starchild.app. We have a web-based app too. So it's on everything.
It's on everything. What about people like myself, child-free queens? Can we get anything out of it?
You can absolutely get something out of it.
Yay.
Because like it's,
Learn how to parent myself.
There's a little, but really it's not just for parents. It's really built for anyone who is, an auntie or an uncle who's important in the life of a kid, who's a teacher. And we're actually like, this is just the first iteration of the app. We're expanding it to be for siblings, for people, grown kids to look at their own parents' charts, for people to look at their own astrological makeup through the lens of like themselves as a kid. Like you can pull your own chart and look at your own sort of inner child stuff, really just to see how your parents everything up. So no, it's actually good. The version of it that we are actively building towards is for like family relationships and intergenerational dynamics across the board. So yeah, definitely don't have to be a parent. If you're dating someone and you're like, what kind of parent would they be? You can put their information in there and find out. We got a lot of people who are using it that way, which is really fun.
Love it. Well, thank you so much, Jessica. I don't see you enough for as close as you live to New York City. Get down here more. We need to get lunch.
I've been working too much. We will. We do need to get lunch.
Thank you. And again, it is the website.
starchild.app. Thank you so much for having me. This was so much fun.
This was so much fun. Thank you for being here. And we'll see you guys next week on an all-new episode of The Financial Confessions. Bye. Thank you so much for joining us, and be sure to tune in next week for an all-new episode of The Financial Confessions. The Financial Confessions is created by The Financial Diet and hosted by me, Chelsea Fagan. It is produced by Alexa Brooks-Major and Holly Trantham. Recording and editing by Emily Fisher, and music and sound effects are from Epidemic Sound. Want more of our content? Head over to our YouTube page, The Financial Diet, to see our monthly deep dives, videos of this show, and our entire backlog of videos and podcasts. I'll talk to you next week.